Hello. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of tone. What tone refers to is in written composition or in a piece of writing, tone is the attitude that a writer has towards a subject or an audience. So, depending on what the writer is writing about or to whom the writer is writing to, the author is always going to have some kind of an emotion or some kind of attitude towards what it is they're writing to. Tone is generally conveyed through word choice, most of all, or the viewpoint that a writer has on a particular subject. Think about the following word pairs: house versus home, afraid versus cautious, extreme versus passionate, cheap versus affordable, and relaxed versus lazy. Each of these word pairs has a different attitude or emotion associated with it. Some of the attitudes or emotions are more positive, others are more neutral or in the middle, while others are more negative. Take the first, for instance. A house is a more neutral description, right? It's a thing, whereas a home, we have either a more positive or emotional association with it. We usually think of a home as being comprised of family. Maybe we think of holidays or love. Uh, and so the word home has a more positive connotation associated with it. The word connotation means the ideas, feelings, and emotions that are associated with a word, whereas the word denotation is the dictionary definition of a word. So every word has both a connotation, feelings associated with it, and a denotation, which is the objective dictionary definition of the term. Let's look at the second pair: afraid versus cautious. Well, I'd much rather be referred to as a cautious person rather than a person who is afraid of everything. Afraid has a more negative connotation or a negative tone, whereas cautious is a little bit more neutral. If someone were to say that I was extreme about my beliefs, that's a little bit more negative than to say I'm passionate about my beliefs. Uh, when purchasing a pair of shoes, I want to buy shoes that are affordable, not cheap. Affordable is a more neutral or even positive connotation or tone, whereas cheap has a much more negative tone associated with it. And then finally, relaxed versus lazy. The lazy student has a negative connotation or a negative tone associated with it, where the relaxed student has a more neutral or even positive tone associated with it. So, one of the ways in which writers will create tone in their writing is by being very thoughtful about the kinds of words that they choose when writing about their subject matter. Let's think about the following words: terrorist versus freedom fighter. Terrorist has a very negative connotation associated with it, and so it's a negative tone word, or it has a negative tone. Whereas freedom fighter might be somebody who has the same beliefs as a terrorist. A freedom fighter has a much more positive tone associated with it. In political discourse, you may see these two words used interchangeably. The word illegal immigrant has a negative connotation associated with it, or a negative tone. Someone who was going to use the word illegal immigrant in their writing signals right away that they do not have a positive view of undocumented people. The term undocumented is a much more neutral or even positive term, one that is a little bit more politically correct. And so someone who is going to use the word undocumented person in a series of writing about immigration is already signaling to the reader that they're a little bit more sympathetic with immigrants. And again, thug versus criminal. Thug has a very nasty or negative connotation associated with it. If you were to hear a news anchor discussing crime on television and referring to criminals as thugs, he or she is signaling a negative tone when describing those individuals, whereas a criminal or someone who commits a crime is a more neutral word to describe people who are engaged in the same activity. So I think these are very clear examples of the kinds of words we might even see in news articles that signal right away what an author's position is. Just by using a negative tone, the author signals a feeling or an attitude that they have towards their subject matter. Tone is also determined by the details that a writer either includes or leaves out. For example, if a writer only includes details in their essay or article that are positive or sympathetic to their topic or their subject, then they probably have a positive tone. Whereas an author who uses only negative examples probably has a very negative tone or a negative attitude towards his or her subject matter. As writers, we generally want to use a blend of both. We want to use negative and positive details and make an effort to achieve a neutral tone where possible. Of course, no writing is 100% neutral. We all have attitudes, feelings, and beliefs about the subject matter that we're writing about. If we didn't, we wouldn't be human. The goal of a composition class is to teach us to be aware of those biases and to try to create neutral tone wherever possible.